Okay, starting in chapter 21 and verse 1. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them as their God, and he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. And death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. And he who was seated on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. Also, he said, Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give from the spring of the water of life without payment. The one who conquers will have this heritage, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers and the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. Then came one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls full of the seven last plagues, and spoke to me, saying, Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great high mountain, and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, its radiance like a most rare jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal. It had a great high wall with 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels. And on the gates the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel were inscribed. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And the one who spoke with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city, and its gates and walls. The city lies 4 square, its length the same as its width. And he measured the city with his rod, 12,000 stadia. Its length and width and height are equal. He also measured its wall, 144 cubits by human measurement, which is also an angel's measurement. The wall was built of jasper, while the city was pure gold, clear as glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with every kind of jewel. The first was jasper, the second sapphire, the third agate, the fourth emerald, the fifth onyx, the sixth carnelian, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, the 12th amethyst. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each of the gates made of a single pearl. And the street of the city was pure gold, transparent as glass. And I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb. And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives its light, and its lamp is the Lamb. By its light will the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. And its gates will never be shut by day. There will be no night there. They will bring into it the glory and the honor of the nations. But nothing unclean will ever enter it, nor anyone who does what is detestable or false, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city. Also on either side of the river, the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be anything accursed, but the throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and his servants will worship him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. And the night will be no more. They will need no light of lamp or sun, for the Lord God will be their light, and they will reign forever and ever. Wow. There's a lot of weird stuff in that text. Let me state at the front. See this ring? Is this my marriage? Is this my wife? This is a symbol of something deep and profound. This is a symbol of a marriage vow. It's a symbol of a love and a nourishing, a cherishing that I'm supposed to have for a woman named Michelle. But this is not my marriage. And to confuse this ring for my marriage would be pretty weird. For me to cook my ring steak, or to vacuum the house and look at the ring and say, "Are you happy, honey?" would be very bizarre and odd. There are things in the Scriptures that are meant to be symbolic, and the symbolic is always pointing to a deeper reality. And for reasons we do not have time to get into, I'm firmly convinced that Revelation is a great symbolic book pointing to a deep and profound reality. And I'm convinced that this text, these 2 chapters, are symbolic of something deep and profound that we will discuss this morning, mainly the future of the church. This text, in fact, gives us 4 gifts that we lost in Eden. 4 gifts that we lost in Eden that are promised to be restored to us. That God has sworn by Himself, and He does not lie, that He has sworn to give us again. The first gift that He has promised to give the church, not everyone in the whole world, but that He has promised to give to His church, is the gift of His presence. Not present like Christmas morning, but presence like we are present together here in this room. The gift of His presence. Look at the first 4 verses of 21, chapter 21, verses 1 to 4. This chapter starts with a pretty chilling promise, a nerve-wracking promise. It says, "I saw a new heaven and new earth, and the first one was gone." Everything in this room, John promises, is going to be gone. Everything you know about yourself as you look in the mirror is going to be changed. It will not be the same. Everything on this planet, made of carbon and nitrogen and oxygen and all the other elements I've forgotten, they will all be gone. Everything we know and love right now that we hold on to so tightly and that we have so much jealousy over when someone takes them from us or when someone has them and we want them, all of those things will be gone. And He says none of them are the point. The point is for us to long and desire that which will never go away. The future of the church is to receive what is better than anything we have now. It is to receive the gift of God's presence. And He says this in verse 3. "I heard a loud voice saying, 'The dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be His people.'" And in verse 2, He explains who these people are. And He says it's the church. It's the bride of Christ. It's anyone in this room who is given that faith in the promise of Genesis 3:15. You, one day, will dwell with God. I have no idea what to tell you that's going to be like, because I don't know. I have no idea what it was like for Adam and Eve to walk in the garden with God every day. I have no idea what it felt like for Adam to lose that presence when he was kicked out of the garden for his sin and rebellion. I have no idea what it was like. If you go back and read Genesis 2, you'll see Genesis 2 describes the perfect country song. Adam and Eve, a perfect marriage. Adam had the perfect woman. Adam was surrounded by endless pets who never died. He was surrounded by a smorgasbord of things he could eat. By the way, he was a vegetarian. I don't know if you noticed that. Go back and read Genesis. He was a vegetarian. He didn't eat meat yet. But everything he had, a perfect wife, a perfect home, perfect pets, perfect food, and God Himself with him. That is the country song all of us wish we could have. What was it like to lose that? I have no idea. But it must have been excruciating. And we all taste it just a little bit when we lie in bed at night wondering when our life will get any better and when the despair we feel will get better. And we all taste it just a little bit of what it must have been like to have God when we have one of those perfect days. That joy you feel when you've studied hard for that exam and you ace it. That joy you feel when you nail the job interview and you know it. The joy you girls dream about when Prince Charming will pop the question. And guys, that day that you dream about when she finally says yes to the dress. We taste in little snippets here what it must have been like to be in Eden and have the best of all with us every day, God Himself. But we've lost it. Now, I know some people have responded to me when I've made this point in the past. Well, the Old Testament people had God dwelling with them. He dwelled in the Holy of Holies in the temple. He was in the tabernacle. Every so often He would visit His people, the burning bush, the cloud of smoke, and the pillar of fire at night over the Israelite camp. That was God dwelling with His people. But you know what? This promise for God dwelling with us, this gift that we're going to get again, was not like those. Those things were temporary. They were localized, meaning they weren't universally all over the world. And they were also profoundly dangerous. You didn't mess around at the burning bush. The voice spoke and said, "Take off your shoes, for this is holy ground." We have nothing to fear for the presence that's coming. We will not have to remove our shoes because we're unholy people. We will be cleansed once and for all. And that's the second gift that God has promised to give us, the gift of purity. Not just the gift of His presence, but the gift of purity. Look in chapter 21, verse 5 to 8. I'll write these on the board for y'all. We're promised the gift of His presence and also the gift of His purity. Jesus swears in verse 5, verse 6, that something new is coming. Something new is coming. I've joked around this week some that I'm an introvert, and I really am. We have 41 students who came with us this week. We have 7 chaperones, and one of them is an extrovert. We had 6 chaperones who were overwhelmed by being surrounded by people, who are overwhelmed by constant discussion, who need chunks of time where they can recover in isolation. And none of us got it. It's hard to be an introvert in an extroverted world. And for extroverts, it's hard for you to be around an introvert because you wonder, what is wrong with you? Why are you so depressed? Why won't you talk to me? And we're just looking at you like, God. And we don't even know what to do or say. And I've joked around a little bit that there are people in the youth group who get really hurt and offended by my personality. Sometimes it's because I'm just being a jerk. But sometimes it's because I'm so overwhelmed that I don't even know how to respond to you. So I kind of shut down. I am tired of the ways I hurt people. I am tired of liars. And I am so tired when I tell a lie and I know it instantly. I am tired of the way I feel jealousy and envy towards others. I'm tired of the way people hurt me. In 1994, when the World Cup was hosted in the United States, there was a huge game between the United States and Colombia. And one of the premier stars of World Cup soccer was a young man who was about 22 named Andres Escobar for the Colombians. Andres Escobar, and by the way, they were supposed to beat the U.S. But Andres Escobar, trying to defend his own goal, made a mistake and kicked the goal in his own net. The U.S. went on to win 2-1. That goal made all the difference. When he went home to Colombia, in humiliation, he was walking the streets of his neighborhood. Someone came up behind him and gunned him down. Cold blood murder. He lost his life because of a slip of his ankle on a blade of grass in the United States. How pitiful is that? What about the unborn? I'm sorry, the fetus. What about fetuses? They're not people, right? 3,000 a day have their life and their little arms and legs ripped apart in the womb every day in this country. What are you and I supposed to think of America the Beautiful, who cares more about protecting bald eagles than protecting human being life and their lives in the womb? Is this really a beautiful country? Jesus promises in this text, especially in verse 8, listen to what he says. As for the cowardly and the faithless and the detestable, as for murderers and the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and liars, their portion will not be in this new heavens and new earth. Their portion will not enjoy my presence. Their portion is in the lake of fire. These men who in cold blood murder children and soccer players, men who lie and steal and kill, will not be with God's people. This promise of this gift of purity is something I need badly. I'm a cynic. The glass, if it's 90% full, is actually 10% empty to me. I see the negative in the world. I long for Jesus to come again. Some people are so in love with this world, and I don't mean that in a negative way, meaning they have this optimism about themselves, that they see all the joy in the world and all the beauty. And on my best day, I still see the negative. This promise that all things will be purified is something I need badly. And even if you think your life is great, I hope you will realize that God is promising this life is not where it's at. You need to latch on to this promise that God will bring His presence and God will purify this earth so that even the day that you see so beautifully, that day that is coming, you can't even imagine how good it is. He doesn't just promise His presence. He doesn't just promise His purity, but He also promises a perfection. A long chunk of text. This is the chunk of text that I read that has weird jewels mentioned. The apostles' names on the bottom of the city. And the Old Testament tribes of Israel, their names on, it's just weird. And again, if you're going to take this text literally, then one day we'll see Peter's name written somewhere under the city. What is this text supposed to be pointing us to if it's not the literalness of the text? Well, there's different kinds of perfection that are mentioned in this text. And the first one is the perfection of the church. He says this in verse 9. He says, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And then it says, He carried me away in the Spirit, in verse 10, to a great high mountain, and showed me the holy city Jerusalem coming out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, its radiance like a most rare jewel. One day, and what's the speaker's name in the evenings? Ricky. Yeah, those oysters are still clogging my brain. Ricky stole my thunder last night, and he mentioned something I was going to mention to y'all, that C.S. Lewis spoke and said, one day, that person in the church that you can't stand, that old man who can't ever open his peppermint candy, that choir member who you can hear above all the others because they're constantly a pitch away from what the tune should be. That dude with really bad breath, that 7th grader that you cannot wait doesn't show up for church because they're so annoying. One day that person will be clothed with the very glory and radiance of God to such an extent that if you saw them right now, you would be tempted to bow down and worship them. However beautiful you think you are, or however ugly you think you are, it's going to change. Some of y'all are going to be bald. Some of you will have babies. Your bodies are going to change. No amount of Maybelline can cover up the change that's going to come to you as you age. It's unbelievable to me how far the Christian church has moved away from where we are supposed to define beauty. We despise old age in the church. We despise weakness and frailty. Not the Scriptures, though. Not God. God says gray hair is to be valued. It is a sign of wisdom and blessing. Do you despise the old in your church? Do you even know 5 of their names? There's a company now called Rodan and Fields. How many of you have heard of Rodan and Fields? Not many? It's sweeping Mississippi. Rodan and Fields and all makeup companies are designed to help you to stop the aging process, to not look young, or if you're young, to make you look angelic. The porn industry is increasingly moving towards images of women who look like young girls. Why do we elevate youth and despise the old? Because we are scared to death of aging. We are scared to death of being weak and ugly. This text says that you better check yourself before you wreck yourself on your concepts of beauty. Because one day, everything we are that we despise, whether bald or fat, thick or thin, short or tall, will not be the point. In fact, one of the first things that's going to change about this kind of perfective beauty is that we won't even be concerned with things any longer. Because the point was never our personal beauty and image anyway. That is what advertisers are pushing on you, and it is a lie from Satan. The point was always supposed to be the glory of God. This is why you hear what's become cliche in the church. I did it for the glory of God. Oh, the glory of God. Well, you know what? It's not a cliche. Because one day the church, you and I, are going to be clothed with that glory. And the angels wish they can be as beautiful as that. So the church itself, you and I, will be perfected in glory. But it's not just a perfected image we're going to get, it's also a perfect defense. Look at verse 12 where it mentions the walls of the city. And it says the wall is very high. And then he goes on to describe the wall. Cities with walls have them for defense. And this city where we're going to doesn't need a physical wall for a defense. Because who do we have defending us? Christ, the Messiah whose blood was shed for us. The Messiah whose blood clothes us. The Messiah who acts as a lightning rod to deflect the wrath of God from us so that now we don't have to fear our Heavenly Father anymore. Because He has adopted us as sons and daughters. I was not present for my 8-year-old birth. In fact, I wasn't present in the first 3 years of her life. Because I didn't even know her mother then. I met them when she was 3 years old. And I went through the adoption process to adopt her. She doesn't have to fear me as a stranger. I'm her daddy. I'm her father. She's been adopted. Her last name is McGuire, and she has the rights and privileges of everything my name brings. Unfortunately for her, that's not much. But you, having the last name of Christ, whatever His last name is, you having the name of God upon your legs, it's weird. The text says Jesus has a tattoo and a name that nobody else knows, and it's on His thigh. And Scripture says all of us will have the name of the Lamb upon our foreheads, the name of God upon our foreheads. We're all going to walk around the tattoo right here. Is that literal? I don't think so. I think it's a metaphor for something deeper and more profound. And it is that you and I, no matter how dysfunctional our families are, the biggest truth is that we have a perfected defense because we have been adopted into His family. It is Christ Himself who defends us. My favorite hymn of all time that I want sung at my funeral is a testimony to the weak faith that I have. Is a mighty fortress is our God. 500-year-old hymn that Martin Luther wrote when he was being pursued by Roman Catholics who wanted to hunt him down and kill him for these very truths we're studying this week. And one of my favorite lines from that, I wrote it down because I can never remember anything, is this. I gotta find it. Where's it at? Here we go. And though this world with devils filled should threaten to undo us, we will not fear, for God has willed His truth to triumph through us. The prince of darkness is grim, but we tremble not for him. His rage we can endure, for lo, his doom is sure. One little word will fell him. The city where we're going, this perfected church, has a perfect defense because our perfect defense is Jesus. And it takes but one word from Him to defend His children, His brothers and sisters, you. I can't wait for that. Because no matter how hard I fight, there are plenty of days where sin still wins. C.H. Spurgeon, the great Baptist preacher from the late 19th century, said that he has two dogs at war with him every day, a dog of sin and a dog of faithfulness. And somebody asked him, which one wins? He said, whichever one I feed the most. Unfortunately for me, I feed sin way too often. I need the perfect defense of Christ on my behalf. And this gift is sworn by Christ Himself to be yours again. You and the church will be perfected. Believe it, brothers and sisters. We have one final gift that we lost in Eden and that He has sworn to give us again. The gift of permanence. Imagine for a second that God had not promised everything we're going to get is going to be permanent. Imagine if He said, I'm going to be with you and purify you and perfect you, but He didn't say it was going to be forever. You know, Eden in the garden was our first home, but it was never meant to be permanent. The new heavens and the new earth, that new city Jerusalem that is coming out of the heavens, where we will dwell forever, is meant to be permanent, and it's promised to be permanent. Listen to what he says in 22, verse 1 to 5. He says there's going to be a permanent water supply. I know that sounds weird, but look at verse 1. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb. Can you think of anywhere, let's play a little Bible trivia. Can you think of anywhere where Jesus said something about water related to Himself in His earthly ministry? The woman at the well. Who said that? Representing Mississippi. Thank you. The woman at the well in John chapter 4, and He said, if you drink from this well, you're going to get thirsty again. But if you drink from the water that I offer you, you will never thirst. He said, I'm the water of life. And here we have Jesus welcoming us into His arms to drink from His cistern, which never runs dry. And it flows directly from His seat of power. It's permanent. I hope you will drink from that water. We don't just have an endless water of life, though. Look at what we also have. We also have endless food, a permanent food supply. Go down to verse 2. On either side of the river, the tree of life. There's that tree from Eden again that we were blocked off from. That if Adam and Eve had taken of its fruit and bitten into it and enjoyed it, they would have lived forever. But they lost access to it. But now we have it permanently. We can't lose it. Why? Because God is dwelling with us and He's purified us. And so here we are having a permanent food supply, and it's a tree of life with 12 kinds of fruit. Can you think of anywhere in the Bible where Jesus talked about Himself and food? You know this one? Let me give you all a hint. Did Jesus say something about bread and His own body? I am the bread of life. And later on He said, eat of my flesh and you'll never die. And the Jews and the Pharisees flipped out because they said, He's trying to make us be cannibals. He wasn't saying, gnaw on my fingers. He was metaphorically speaking and saying, if you eat of me by faith, you will never go hungry again. Everything you long for that is pure and holy will be satisfied. So we don't just have this permanent water of life, but we have a permanent food supply that will always bring us a permanent health. We'll always be healthy. Look at the second part of verse 2 where it says, the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. I don't know how many of you in here suffer from any kind of an ailment. Maybe you're diabetic. But I do know this. Y'all think you're indestructible. You're young and strong and healthy. I'm only 34. I could barely get out of bed this morning. The wicked little boys in my youth group put me on the top bunk. It's torture. I got out this morning and there was the guy below me and I went, Look out, I'm coming down. And it was a very awkward dismount for me. I actually have excruciating back pain. I got to go to the chiropractor 3 times a week. My shoulder is constantly in pain. Does anybody know what hydrocodone is?
Oh, yes.
Isn't it wonderful? Hydrocodone is what they give you after you give birth. Hydrocodone is a narcotic. It's a drug. And it's strictly monitored by the federal government. And I got some. It is great. I brought like 9 hydrocodone pills with me this week. I haven't taken any. But this morning I seriously considered taking half of one, but I thought I would rather be in pain and have a lucid mind, have a mind that's working and clear, than take hydrocodone this morning and be like, hey guys,
It's all good.
Jesus love you. I want this healing. And it's going to be mine. I want the healing of broken relationships healed. I want my physical ailments taken away. I am tired of cancer. I've had multiple friends commit suicide. My family struggles with addiction, with depression. I want it gone. And here Jesus offers not just a permanent water of life to bring us healing and satisfy our thirsts, not just a permanent bread supply, a permanent food supply to take away all our hungers and dissatisfactions, but a permanent health with no more cancer, no more sniffles or flu, no more dirty diapers, nothing that is a signal of illness or waste. I want that and I need that. No more death. How many of you ever watched the History Channel? Yeah. In 2009, the History Channel premiered a show called Life After People. It was awesome. The whole premise of the show was to pretend that an apocalyptic situation had happened. A plague struck mankind and everyone died. And it went around they interviewed engineers, seismologists, weather control experts. What would happen to our cities and homes when there was no one there to maintain them? And they have examples of this. How many of you have heard of Chernobyl? A few of you, yeah. It was in 1986 in a town called...
Pripyat.
Say it again.
Pripyat.
Pripyat? I can't even remember it. And I didn't take hydrocodone. But in that town, there was a nuclear plant called Chernobyl. Now, this is when we were in the middle and at the height of the Cold War. A nuclear reactor in the Soviet country exploded. Shot radiation everywhere. It was a major disaster, and it could have been worse. But the town had to be evacuated, and no one has lived there since. And you can go through and look on Google pictures of this city and see what happened with nobody there. Trees are growing in the middle of playgrounds, and it's just unbelievable. And the show on the History Channel, Life After People, showed what would happen to New York in a situation like that. And there was a line from that show that I'll never forget. It was in the introduction to the show, and so it was on every episode, and it said, "Everything man-made carries within itself the seeds of its own destruction. Everything you touch, everything you make, is infected with death, decay, demise. It's going to be gone. Nothing you make will last forever. But those things which God remakes will never have death touch it again. This city will never die. The glorious radiance that will be yours and mine, the purity you'll have, the perfection, it's ours forever. Death, this text says, will be no more. Verse 3, no longer will there be anything cursed, but the throne of God and of the Lamb will be there, and His servants will worship Him. They will see His face, and His name will be on their foreheads. There won't be nighttime anymore, but an endless day. Guys, this is the Christmas morning that never ends. This is the Christmas that you've always wanted. This is the good day that never ends. This is the future of the church. Please please don't disregard what you are already a member of by your faith. Don't dismiss what Jesus is sworn to do. Have the courage to deal with the reality of the messiness of the sin in every church, because you are a sinner not yet perfected. I'm going to close with this thought. If you have been baptized, and you have the faith in Christ, you are a member of the church. And that baptism is a symbol of all of these things that are coming. It is not something you did. Baptism is not what I do to declare something to the world. It is God's sign upon you that you are His. And it is a promise that these gifts will be yours. Don't neglect your baptism. Remember it. Remember these promises. Communion. The Lord's Supper. Every time you take communion with your church, you are having faith and declaring to the watching world, I trust in the blood of Christ, His blood shed for me, and I believe His body was broken for me, and I believe that both will give me this everlasting healing. Because one day I will see Him. Isn't it interesting that the night He was betrayed, Jesus gave us a family meal? He told us to have supper together and to remember these things. Isn't it interesting that the last day he had his feet planted on earthly soil, He told His disciples to baptize each other and to baptize others. Those are the two big signs of the church, baptism and the Lord's Supper. There's a reason Presbyterians believe what we do. There's a reason we make those things a big deal. Because they were public declarations of the gospel from God to us and us to each other. Don't slip in to your old way of thinking that the church is just a bunch of people who don't matter. You will soon go to college, find a church, join it. You're already a member. Get there. Get to know the elders. Let them shepherd you. Let them guide you away from your sin. Let them direct your purity. Submit yourselves to them. This is God's will for us. Thank you all for being here this week. If you want to ask questions, you can come up to me afterwards. We've got about 10 minutes.